Hello, everyone. I'll start off with a little introduction. My name is Robyn Dalgleish. I'm a solution architect at Rangle. And today we're going to be covering a little bit of SSG and SSR. You may have seen a webinar that Bertrand did before me that covered a bit of that. And Contentful headless CMS with Angular. So this is the full flow. Please, if you'd like to kind of go on a bit more of a deep dive regarding SSG and SSR, we'll do a little bit of a review here, but please go see that webinar by Bertrand. There'll be information in the description below. So let's get started with Contentful headless CMS with Angular. So we'll start though by doing kind of a little bit of SSG and SSR review. So we've got, if you saw the previous webinar, we have a different demo application today. So you'll see this looks like any other application. You've got like the hover links here, but the only difference between this application and maybe another is that this is all all pre-rendered. So the HTML is completely rendered before hitting you or the browser. So what will happen is this would come in fully HTML fully formed and then kind of become animated, and we'll talk about that as we go. So, all right. So yeah, today we're going to be briefly talking about why speed matters, rendering strategies to achieve speed. We've actually been doing a lot of work on this, so I'm kind of excited to chat about it at Rangle, and meta framework called Analog that you may have heard about. So these three pieces, I'm kind of doing a bit of a review, and then we'll get into dynamic component rendering and routing in Angular, and Contentful headless CMS, which is super exciting to share. So without further ado, yeah, let's build a highly performant Angular application. So briefly go over why speed matters. Why are we here? So speed affects the user. There's been plenty of studies done that show that even 100 millisecond delay is perceptible by the end user. And at 100 or 10,000 milliseconds, the user often even abandons the task. So very important. Speed also affects SEO. Google uses speed as a ranking factor. So please see a webinar if you want to kind of go into a bit more on that. And speed also affects the business. There's quite a famous study that was done that found that every 100 milliseconds of latency cost Amazon 1% in sales. So speed matters. Essentially, what we are kind of talking about today is rendering strategies that improve speed. So the different rendering strategies are no pre-rendering at all, which is kind of what I chatted about at the beginning. Basically, you have your HTML, JavaScript is downloaded, and you're essentially given like a blank page before the browser kind of animates anything. Then we've got pre-rendering, which is essentially you have HTML fully formed before hitting the browser, and then the JavaScript is activated. And two kind of pre-rendering strategies, or under the umbrella of pre-rendering, are static site generation and server-side rendering. The key difference here being that static site generation is at build time. So you would have everything fully formed. Server-side rendering is essentially you have the server and every request coming in from the end user. It's the server and gets a fully formed HTML kind of pre-prepared. So a bit of work done beforehand. Awesome. So basically you'd want to use, you don't have to use kind of one or the other of these. You can use SSG in some places in your application and SSR in others. So for example, for SSG, you would want to use that for marketing pages, blog posts, e-commerce, product listings, anything you can. And SSR, where SSG isn't possible, is for things like account pages or with specific information to the end user, or anything where quite a bit of data is changing quite a lot. So we use that whenever we can't use SSG, essentially. So we're kind of starting to get into the new pieces. The problem with kind of doing this SSG and SSR, these pre-rendering strategies with Angular, is we've got essentially Angular universals. There's no kind of Next.js, similar way to kind of do this. We have Next.js for React, and there's not kind of a facsimile for Angular. So with Angular Universal, we'd have to kind of choose what we want to pre-render, choose what we'd want to server-side render or client-side render, sometimes one or the other. And you would also have to write some server-side code, and the kind of writing those APIs can be quite convoluted. So it's not a great DX experience. And so a lot of people either move to Next.js or don't use these strategies, which is really unfortunate. So enter Analog. Super exciting. We chatted about this as well, but Analog is a full stack meta framework for building applications and websites in Angular. Basically makes server-side generation and server-side static site generation, and server-side rendering a great experience, a great developer experience, does a lot of the grunt work for you, and makes everything that we're chatting about possible much easier. And so essentially what you would do if you wanted to create an Analog app is just essentially run npm or yarn create Analog, and you have kind of the basis for your application. You basically get what you would get within Angular CLI, but it's ready to do a lot of the heavy lifting that we chatted about that would be difficult to do with Angular Universal. So if you kind of take a look at this folder structure here, you've got, the main TS server files here, then that's the same thing that you would get with kind of an Angular CLI. So there's kind of a few key differences, so we'll chat about them briefly. Basically, you will get a pages folder when you create this application, and the pieces in the pages folder will become your pages, and the route will actually become the URL path. So basically, if we look over here to our website on the right, we would have kind of pages, plants. So maybe our index would be kind of our main page. If we go to the next page, plants, we might have a page here that when clicked on has different plants under it. This structure here basically allows for nested routes. So essentially you could kind of nest this forever. You could have plants, deciduous plants, and then have plant IDs under that as much as you would want. And these kind of strange square brackets here allow for dynamic routing, which if you've ever worked with Next.js, you'd be familiar with. Analog does a similar thing. So we'd be able to pass in kind of the plant ID here, and that would be part of the path, the root path. Oh, sorry, the path. So this is where we also have API routes. This is built into Analog as well. You can organize it with versioning. It's just the root folder. Essentially, you get the root folder. You'd be able to version here and reference that. And then under that, you would have your API endpoints. Essentially, when you deploy this, you would get your API and your application just all built in, ready to go. Just like was done before, I'll point out this folder, file, and we'll chat about it later, but I'll leave that for now. But I want to point out that difference because we'll reference it again later. So inside of, if you've ever kind of created or worked in Angular before, you'll recognize this mostly. This is kind of your typical Angular component. There's a little bit of difference here that, again, I'll kind of point to a little bit. So pay no attention to this kind of template piece here. That's a special, we'll chat about it later. But basically with Analog, you would, import your component, and then you would see that component on the page as you would kind of creating a typical Angular component. The API route is similar to writing just an AWS Lambda, so like a serverless function. So, that's exactly how you would write that within the plants TS file and the server routes that we chatted about. And so this is the Vite file that I mentioned before. This is where you would be able to actually configure static site generation. So everything that we chatted about beforehand, just with having that folder, the pages folder, and the files within that, you get server-side rendering just out of the box. This is the file with the pre-render property here that you would be able to specify routes that will be rendered at build time, so can be static site generated here. So that is all amazing, already kind of built up to be able to kind of handle create kind of some performant applications. But what we haven't kind of covered yet is a bit of a challenge that typically adding content, to a CMS, if we're going with a site that, we're not just going to use kind of a static site. We have content creators that are going to be updating pieces, adding blog posts. Typically that content isn't added always at build of an application. So to be able to pre-render this and get the benefits of what we did, when a creator adds content, we would need a second manual step to update the app, load the data, and render it. So if we want content dynamically updating, historically, this would be done through the client. We'd make a new request to the server, get the content, and show it. But this is decent, but not as performant as a pre-rendered site. So we want everything that we've chatted about. So how do we marry these two together? Again, we've got Next.js, but if we want to get data from the CMS, rebuild the entire application and render it, there's not really a facsimile in Angular for that. So, so far we've got analog doing most of what we need for this. So we're getting data from the CMS, using that to define what will be pre-rendered on pages, but it doesn't align with dynamically specifying what components to render. So a lot of headless CMSs ask for this now. Contentful, we can definitely do this. So essentially, we want to have components that are mapped to CMS pieces. If we want to add kind of a blog snippet, have kind of an image and a caption that is configurable, and then add that in the CMS, and then have that rendered the way that the copy kind of has dictated, then this is what we want to do. So essentially, what we have done here at Rangle, so we have a pretty cool team of folks that have done a bit of work on this, and I'm excited to kind of chat about it. There's also a link to deep dive a bit more into dynamic routing that'll be in the description below as well, but we'll touch on it a tiny bit here. So basically, I'll kind of just want to cover the flow of how data would enter this application that we have here, and how we would use that or to create kind of these dynamically rendered components. So if you remember in the index page anyways, we're in the kind of slug page now, but we've got the render template component, which is key, and the template here. So that is the key difference for these dynamically rendered components. If we go into that render template component, essentially the builder of this kind of dynamically builds these components. This is the key heavy hitter here. So we've got the on-change and render components. Again, I'll point you to the blog post that was done around dynamically rendered components in the link below if you want to deep dive a bit more into this. But basically what we're doing is we're getting data from our CMS, kind of shaping that data into the shape that we would like, just into a tree shape. That's passing that with this inject load function to our kind of build component file that we've created, just added to this project that we've already been chatting about. And then we would take those build components and map them, each item or leaf from this tree, to each component and place it in the right spot. So basically what we would get after this is a fully dynamic page where you could interact with it. So what I wanted to do is kind of take you through building a new page in Contentful. I can show you a bit of how we created this application or this site here. and we'll build a new page and you'll be able to see how it dynamically updates. So if we were to go here, this is our Contentful GUI. Of note here is basically, or super important, is the content model. So the little pieces that are mapped directly to components in our component library. So we've got those listed here. If we were to click on example, for example, like CTA, edit this. This field URL is what you would need to directly link to in your component library. And then your just, link to content. So if we go back, then we have content, which essentially is what allows us to kind of make pieces up from the content models that we have. So for example, you saw featured text and main hero. If we go back to content model, you'll see featured text and main hero. So we're making these pages kind of out of these components. So what we have here, you'll note navigation and footer. These are kind of global. So we do actually note those inside of our code base and reference them directly as opposed to having them dynamic. So I think that's the only piece that would need to be so far. I mean, until the next session, maybe we'll have this resolved. We reference those directly, but anything within pages can be dynamically added. So let's do one together. If we add an entry, so we're just going to make a page right now together. So this is the slug that is going to be used in that, like pulled into and used as the URL path. So let's call this, let's do the plants. So plants, and then we want to add content. So we're going to add one of our kind of new components here. So let's say a CTA banner. And let's call this Monstera. Oops, there we go. And add media, because why not? I have one beautiful photo of a Monstera prepared. Let's see if we can do this. Title, Monstera. Potted. Monstera plant. And then let's open a file and we want, oops. Oh, there's not, there we go. Awesome desktop. There we go. Monstera. There we go. And we're going to publish this. And go back one. Here we'll be able to publish this. This is our CTA banner. And then if we go back and publish, this is our plants sections, that section that's Monstera. We should be able to see it here as a new page. And if we go back to our application, I need to just, there we go. We're going to go plants. And there's our Monstera. Awesome. Super dynamic. Content creator could come in, add that, and it would be dynamically created right away. And essentially, what this allows is kind of the automation of a very challenging process in Angular with the help of Analog and some pretty cool people at Rangle that we were able to kind of put together start to finish SSG and SSR headless CMS site. Super performant. I honestly love working with Contentful. It's like really neat to be able to bring that to clients that I work with and see kind of these folks being able to, content creators be able to add to a site without needing to kind of contact a dev. And so that's pretty cool. And then you have the benefits of all of the speed that matters. So thank you so much for tagging along with me today. If you have any questions, please leave a comment below. We'll reach out to you. Thank you so much.